What's going on, young people? Thanks for joining me for today's lecture, Unit 6, Day 3, Psychosexual Development. Okay? Today's our day where we talk about how crazy Sigmund Freud is. So I've called him Psycho Freud this year, right? And it's because his theory is called the psychodynamic theory or the psychoanalytic theory. Sometimes also we refer to his psychosexual theory. Okay, so that term Psycho Freud reminds us that his theory is psychodynamic, analytic, sexual, and also Psycho Freud because this theory is a little bit crazy. That's what we're talking about today in class. Okay, so there will be a quiz over this on Friday. Shouldn't be a long video, but it's a weird one. Okay, so Freud's theory. If you've ever seen this iceberg in the world of psychology, it's always been about Freud's theory. Okay, how personality is designed. Let's see if I can get you all a little closer. All right. So Freud said there are three parts to the personality. Okay. The id, which is the little selfish animal devil inside of you. The id, right, that you're born with. Babies are all id, selfish desire. The superego, which is the good part of you. Dun, 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 the super part of you. It's the rule following, wanting to be good, wanting to be nice part of you that develops slowly over the course of your life, starting in childhood when you learn rules and how to share and how to be nice to people and friends and get along and be a good person. So you have the selfish kind of evil part of you, wants things. You have the nice rule following, good, law abiding part of you. And they're always in tension. They're always battling each other. And the result is your ego. It's who you are. So your ego is your personality that we all see. Okay. And Freud said this comes from your libido, sexual energy, that according to Freud's crazy theory, that as you grew up during your childhood, in your unconscious, so below the surface, that's why the iceberg metaphor comes to play. Freud said that most of your personality is because of what's going on below the surface. Things that you might not be aware of that maybe aren't obvious to you and to others. So Freud said that you go through these stages, and how you go through the stages determines what your personality will be like. Whether you're a controlling person or whether you're a loose, carefree person. Whether you have positive relationships or whether you have trust problems. Freud said it's the result of your childhood and specifically these sensitive areas of your body, okay? And Freud said that as you go through childhood, the different sensitivities, they change. It's a weird theory, we're gonna get all into it. Here's the mnemonic I want you to use to remember the 5 stages. Owls always play late games. You know, because owls, they're nocturnal, they're up all night. Owls always play late games. OAPLG. If you need to pause it to finish writing. But those are the 5 stages. They start with those letters. OAPLG. We're going to go through the 5 stages. And remember, Freud's theory is not objective, scientific, true. It was just his explanation for how he thought we developed. Okay? So let's dive on in. Roman numeral 2, the 5 stages of Freud's weird theory of development of personality. The first stage is the oral stage, O. This stage makes sense. Freud said that during the first year and a half of your life, the way you interact with the world is through your mouth, what you can taste. I'll show you all a video maybe at some point of this kid who the mom is showing him a ball and the kid takes the ball and puts it in his mouth because the only way he can experience the world is through what he can taste, okay? Little kids, they can't see very far. They can't move around very easily. But to them, the whole world is about their mouth. We talked about the rooting reflex, babies trying to find food, looking for a nipple, basically, why they suck on things. Freud said that this all goes together. It's the oral stage, that's the body part that is most sensitive and most important to their development, okay? So if someone is described as having an oral fixation, they eat a lot, or they vape, they smoke cigarettes, or they're always having to chew gum, right? Or they bite their fingernails, or they suck their thumb for a long time growing up. All of that, Freud would say, is a sign of a problem during the oral stage, right? Maybe they're some psychologists would say maybe their parents breastfed them too long, or fed them through a bottle for too long, and as a result, they had a dependence on their mouth, pleasure, gratification, experience, fulfillment, nourishment coming through this experience. And Freud says that what happens to you during this stage, well, it impacts your personality going forward. Freud says that people who talk too much or people who don't talk enough, it's because of what happened to them in their first year and a half of life. Okay, it's pretty powerful, right? Especially when we talked about attachment a couple classes ago. This idea that what happens in the first year or two of your life, it shapes your personality. Freud thought the same thing, just a little bit weirder, the way that he structured it. Okay, O stands for oral, having to do with the mouth. Okay, around the time that you are 2, what is the most important development to a child, to a family? Well, kid starts doing potty training. Okay, the A stands for the anal stage, referring to potty training, bowels. Okay, the idea here is that how potty training goes determines how an individual develops control and self-control. Okay, and Freud believed that if your parents were too strict and put too much pressure on you, if you had trouble during potty training, that would end up affecting your personality. You would have control problems. He said that OCD, being obsessive compulsive, needing things to be a certain way, a particular way, the way that you organize your life, schedule your life, the way that you like your room to be, that all those things come from the control habits that are the result of your potty training experience. Okay, pretty fascinating. Talk to your parents. Ask them how it was for you. How long did you use a pacifier, and what did potty training look like for you? Okay, pretty interesting stuff. The third stage, the P, stands for the word phallic. Phallic. So it's like an F sound, phallic, but it starts with a P. During this stage, Freud said that this is the point where little boys and little girls realize that little boys and little girls have different body parts, and they're fascinated by this. Okay, you've interacted with like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. They're very obsessed with and proud of their specific body parts, and sometimes they want to show those off. Okay, so you may have stories about when you were 3 or 4. Maybe your family had people over and you wanted to take all your clothes off. Okay, that's what 3-year-olds do. Freud said that's a natural part of growing up and realizing that boys and girls are different, have different parts. Okay, Freud's theory is very heteronormative, meaning he assumes that people fit very neatly into one of 2 categories. So we'll talk more about that in class. Okay, we'll also talk about this: incest, incestuous sexual feelings. That's weird. It's the weirdest part of Freud's theory, the Oedipus complex. We'll come back to it. Okay. Freud said, finally, sort of a normal period for kids, the latent stage. Remember, we talked about latent learning earlier in the year with Edward Tolman, those rats who were in the maze trying to go through it. They've been learning the whole time. It was hidden learning. It didn't show up until later. Freud did say during elementary school, middle school, up until puberty, that there was no obvious sexual desire on the part of these children, which the whole thing is crazy, psycho Freud. But that they're just like kind of living life. They're learning how society works. They're making friends, etc. Freud said that once you hit puberty, that everything about your personality, the genital stage, it's about wanting to have sex. Freud believed that the reason why pretty much everyone does everything after puberty is to increase their chances of having sex, of reproducing. That everything you do, Freud would say, the clothes you wear, the music you listen to, the hobbies you pick, the clubs you join, that everything, Freud says, is to enhance your chances of increasing your sexual activity, the genital stage. All right, so these are the 5 stages: oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital. So again, mouth, eating, pacifier, binky, stage 1. Potty training, stage 2. Learning about your private parts, stage 3. Normal kid life, stage 4. And then the 5th stage is about sexual relationships with others. That's what Freud believed people cared about. Okay. Whew. All right. I thought I was going to come back to the phallic stage and this whole incestuous sexual feelings thing. Let's talk about the Oedipus complex. Oedipus Rex, famous Greek play, tragedy, okay, about a kid. You may know the story. If you don't, you can Google it. Oedipus Rex, R-E-X. It's the story of a kid who there was a prophecy about him that he would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. And his mom and dad found out about the prophecy and decided that they didn't like the prophecy very much. So they ordered that he be killed, right? And obviously the person who was supposed to kill him doesn't kill him. He grows up in another kingdom. He comes back to war. He doesn't know who his parents are. He doesn't know about the prophecy. He doesn't know his story necessarily, but he kills a guy and then he marries a woman. Turns out, killed his dad, married his mom. Disturbing, weird story. The term Oedipal, if you've ever heard that adjective described as something creepy, Oedip comes from Oedipus, okay? And the idea here, Freud believed that little boys fall in love with their moms and that little girls fall in love with their dads. So Oedipus for boys, Electra complex for girls, okay? Pretty disturbing, all right? Gets more disturbing, okay? So what I have here are 5 things that Freud said happened in the Oedipus complex. Psychologists don't think these things are legit, that these thoughts are actually happening. Freud believed it was in the subconscious and the unconscious, buried deep down, repressed feelings that you're not aware of. But Freud said this is what drove your personality and shaped you as a person. Okay? Most psychologists say this is nuts. Okay, all I want you to do is pause if you need to. There are 5 things here. They're out of order. I want you to try and figure out which of these goes in which order. What happens first? What leads to what? What leads to what? What leads to what? Which makes what happens. Okay. So what's the beginning thing and what's the end goal? Okay. It's so weird. It's so weird. Okay. But the end goal is, pause and try to do this, but the end goal is that a kid develops a super ego and ends up becoming a normal human being. Okay. So Oedipus Rex, here's how you spell it. It's a fun t-shirt. Awkward. Girls, it's not just little boys. There's also an Electra complex. The same thing. There are 5 things here that Freud said happened to little girls. See if you can put these in the correct order, and we'll talk about these in class, talk about what Freud believed. Okay. Here are some of the phenomena, the terms that you need to know about this stage. So I already wrote down Oedipus Electra complex. So castration anxiety. Freud said that little boys, the reason why they act the way they do as little boys, Freud was worried that their fathers would castrate them. Yeah, cut off. Yeah. Okay. Freud said that for little girls, that when they find out in the backstage that little boys have a penis and they don't, that this impacts their personality, their development, and that they end up focusing on having children. That Freud said the reason why little girls play with dolls and play house and pretend to be mommies, Freud said it's them dealing with the fact that they don't have a penis, and as they're going through this process, they're learning about themselves and their bodies, that's what helps them. And this is the goal, identification. Freud said that eventually healthy children, they get over the Electra complex, the Oedipus complex, and they end up viewing their same-sex parent as a role model that they should be like someday. And they start to copy and mimic them and their behaviors. This is a crazy theory, okay? There is some legitimacy here that we've talked about attachment, that kids need to have a good relationship with an adult caregiver. It does not necessarily need to be the biological parent like Freud thought, but this is an important part of development, attachment. That's an idea that we actually take from Freud's crazy theory and apply today. Now, if something goes wrong, I talked about oral fixation. There's different forms of, 1 second, sorry. Someone's at the door, carry on. If something goes wrong during a stage, Freud would say that someone can get fixated in a particular stage, and this leads to them being neurotic, having neuroses, having anxiety that can impact them going forward. Okay, so identification good, fixation bad, according to Freud. And Freud said this is the root of all personality problems. Weird theory, I know. Okay, make sure you can answer these questions. You can name the 5 stages. We'll talk about which ones you find interesting. We'll talk about these specific terms and what they mean. We'll go over that in class. And I also want y'all to, come on, little keyboard. Also want y'all to take a minute. We've now talked about all this stuff in terms of developmental psychology, okay? This is the, 3rd video? So see if you can match these 9 terms on the left, match them up with the researcher on the right. We've talked about all these people, a lot of researchers, this particular unit with a lot of different theories. I want to make sure that you can identify and understand what each theory was all about, okay? So take some time to do this. We'll go over the answers in class. Appreciate you guys. Peace out.